Number 10. Rune's Xmas. Likely for a lifetime for one unfortunate child, Punisher is disguised as Santa and posing as a man looking to raise funds for charity. When he asks the passing Napolitano family to help the poor, they refuse. He reveals himself and then guns them down, right in front of a child! Horrified, the child asks why, and Frank answers they were naughty. Wow. Well, that kid will fortunately never misbehave again, but it will probably also take years of therapy to undo the damage that the Punisher also just did to his mental health. He's gonna be terrified of Santa for forever. Number 9. Murders Litterbugs. Although this story was later retconned somewhat in an effort to explain away the Punisher's intense and erratic behavior here when it was first released, this behavior was considered canon. Punisher had recently returned to the streets, condemning them and their inhabitants as being worse than ever. He was out to punish those who caused any harm to others or society in general, which meant zero tolerance for litterbugs. At one point, we watch as he guns down a couple in the rain who discard a soggy newspaper onto the ground they've been using as a makeshift umbrella. Aren't newspapers compostable, Frank? I mean, I guess they take a long time to decompose, so it's still not amazing for the environment, but still. Professing in his internal monologue that littering is a crime, the Punisher fires at the couple and we see at least one of them topple over in the corner of a panel. Their fate isn't confirmed, but it's definitely heavily implied here that he just killed them for littering. Number 8. Torture Research. Garth Ennis's Punisher story, The Slavers, is widely recognized for being one of the darkest ones out there. While the Punisher seems justified in taking on some of the worst and most horrible people that he's ever gone up against, and you definitely root for him, he also goes to great lengths to deal out his own form of justice here. At one point we see Castle going through medical textbooks just so he can increase his knowledge for enhanced torturing purposes. There are countless violent moments in the story that both feel justified and also make you wince as you see just how far the Punisher is willing to go to punish these people. It should also be noted that this is a mission of vengeance that Frank is actually undertaking not even for himself, but for someone who escaped these villains, a woman named Viroka, and for her baby whom her captors had killed. Number 7. Torturing Barracuda. So Barracuda is admittedly a villain in the comics, but still the way Punisher disposes of villains can sometimes just be so graphic and awful that it leaves you sympathizing with them. That was the kind of fate Barracuda was resigned to, a villain introduced during Garth Ennis's time writing the Punisher in the 2004 Punisher series, which was part of the Max label at Marvel. This Punisher, by the way, is also resigned to another alternate world as well, and honestly a lot of his actions were pretty horrific. So yeah, this is not Earth 616, my friends. This is Max, adult comic stuff. When it came to Barracuda, Castle punished him by connecting some sensitive parts to a car battery and shocking the heck out of him. Later on he would try to kill Barracuda in an explosion, but only severely burn him. Then he would chop off both his arms and bury a pickaxe in his chest before shooting his head to bits with an AK-47. It's pretty awful, I gotta say. Number 6. Kills off the last humans. During Marvel's The End, Marvel shared with us what various characters would do when faced with the events of and aftermath of the apocalypse. The Punisher was able to track down the last surviving humans, who also happened to be a bunch of jerks who were basically responsible for the events of World War III, which had resulted in this apocalyptic scenario and world that we found ourselves in. They offered the Punisher a choice. He could let them live and they would work to restart the planet and human race using genetic samples, or he could kill them for what they'd done, but you know, then humanity would die with them. Being the Punisher, he decided of course to kill them. Though I gotta say, it definitely sounds like they deserved that, but still, he just like condemned humanity for forever. Now we're gonna be extinct. Number 5. Serves Thanos. If you don't know Cosmic Ghost Rider, I highly recommend checking him out. He's an alternate version of Frank Castle that agreed to become a spirit of vengeance and thereby Ghost Rider. As such, he survives basically the death of all of planet Earth when Thanos comes to raise it in his destruction of the universe, and eventually when everyone else who would stand up against Thanos in the cosmos has been defeated, joins Thanos. He does at least try to stand up to Thanos in the beginning, but in the end kind of goes insane and then sees serving Thanos as really his only option, especially if he doesn't want to be alone. Because, you know, it's hard to live forever and be alone forever. It's really sad. CGR helps Thanos to destroy what is left of the universe and remains loyal to the Mad Titan Thanos even when an opponent looms who could actually stand a chance at defeating him, known as the Fallen One, formerly the Silver Surfer, who now also wields the power of Mjolnir. Number 4. Raised Thanos. Or at least he attempted to anyways. This heinous act, which doesn't inherently sound too heinous truth be told, came to us from the alternate reality that Cosmic Ghost Rider belongs to. Later on in CGR's story, he is granted the opportunity to travel to any time and place that he would like by Odin. This twisted version of Frank chooses to travel back to the moment when Thanos was born. CGR attempts to use his pen and stare on the young baby, who it doesn't work on because, you know, baby Thanos is still at this point innocent and is yet to become corrupted. Although I gotta be honest, does the pen and stare really ever work for Ghost Riders? I feel like I see it fail more times than it works in comics. CGR, instead of killing baby Thanos, decides then to raise baby Thanos himself, hoping to alter the future by teaching Thanos to be good. He later runs into the future version of that baby Thanos all grown up and learns that raising Thanos led to an even worse alternate future for Earth, where people are imprisoned by this Punisher Thanos, kept in camps, and killed if they choose to step out of line when it comes to Thanos' plan for enforced peace on Earth. Basically, without meaning to, Frank actually created an alternate reality where living on Earth is kinda like living in hell. Number 3. Executions. While it might not be as bad as condemning Earth to the fate of his adopted son, Punisher Thanos, I personally find this gruesome depiction of the character even worse. This take on the Punisher and his actions comes to us from the 2005 Punisher video game. Here you gotta play as Frank Castle beating up targets to secure key information before executing them. The adults-only rated game was described as having over 100 unique executions for fans to choose from. Wow. The fact that many of these were also super brutal and torturous ways to die only made all of the Punisher's actions here, which you as the player were in control of, even worse. Talk about a glorification of violence. Number 2. Kills the Marvel Universe. In the story Punisher Kills the Marvel Universe, we get a front row seat to watching Frank Castle eliminate literally pretty much every hero, villain, and just about anyone else who gets in his way, as he makes quick work of the entire Marvel verse. As awful as this is, it's also really impressive that Frank, who is admittedly just a human, is able to take out all these superpowered beings so successfully and often efficiently. In the end, after Punisher has eliminated just about everyone there is, one person is left for him to take down, for it to be considered a completely clean sweep: himself. And Frank doesn't even hesitate. Now, what caused all this chaos, by the way? Like in many other Punisher stories, it was the death of his family, which in this reality appeared to have happened while they were caught in the crossfire of a superhuman battle. Number 1. Excuses. One of the worst things about the Punisher is that he tries to make you feel like his actions are justified by using the loss of his family as an excuse. And oftentimes that also works for us readers. Now, I'm not saying that what happened to Frank Castle's family wasn't terrible, because it was. But ultimately, what the Punisher represents is this obsession with violence and the feeling of a never-ending war. Jason Aaron, in his Punisher run, attempted to reveal the veiled truth behind Frank's excuses for continuing this never-ending battle, which honestly Frank himself is likely not even aware of, when he proposed a story with Frank Castle contemplating divorce moments before his family is killed, and also returning home and basically questioning if he actually enjoys life or if he would rather just kill people.
Coming in number 10, we've got the Pizza Party Dog Pile. What a place to start, am I right? It sure doesn't sound like a brutal kill. In fact, the way I've titled this one, it seems like something that might happen at your little cousin's hockey tournament. All fun and games until someone loses an eye, right? Or in this case, suffocates underneath an enormous man. See, Frank Castle and one of his many enemies, known as the Russian, have fought on multiple occasions. In this particular instance though, the Russian gained the upper hand. Pummeling the Punisher, things weren't looking too good for our revenge-fueled friend. However, as it often tends to happen, the fight got taken a little too far and the tables did turn. After tossing the Punisher into his neighbor, Mr. Bumpo's apartment, some improvised weapons were used. Hot, spicy pizzas to be precise. Castle tosses some of these molten meals into his adversary's face and then uses Mr. Bumpo himself as a smothering weapon. The rotund man makes for a great weight, and the Russian gets stuck underneath. Adding a little assistance to the top of the pile, he stays there for a solid half hour. At that point, the Russian's breath is all but guaranteed to be stopped. Suffocation is a brutal way to die no matter how you slice it, but being assailed by someone else's dinner and then squashed under a huge friendly man? That's tough. And poor Mr. Bumpo, right? Unwillingly added to the fray as a weapon against a murderous madman by a murderous madman. And to make matters worse, Castle ensures the Russian's death by decapitating him. I'm sure that's an experience Bumpo does not look back upon fondly. Coming in number 9, we've got a bad day for Wolverine. If we're being honest here, I'm not so sure what a great day for Wolverine looks like. He's haunted by his past, traumatized by the experiments performed upon him, and all around pretty grumpy and surly. So a good day might just be an extra hot dog at dinner time, or maybe a smile from a person he isn't totally annoyed by. But a bad day, oh boy, this one really takes the cake. The Punisher and Wolverine are technically on the same side most of the time, right? They're fighting for the good guys. Kinda. So one wouldn't necessarily expect them to go at each other, but it did end up happening. And in this fight, Frank Castle does not hold back. Where do I even start? Wolverine's face is ripped off, exposing the bare skull underneath. Ouch. Then there's the bit where Castle takes a shotgun and blasts Wolverine's, well, bits. That can't be too pleasant either. And to seal the deal, while Wolverine is crawling along the floor, Castle revs up a steamroller and runs it right over his mangled body. That's pretty far from heroic behavior, don't you think? Coming in number 8, we've got Redhead Ransom. I guess these days the goofy kids from Riverdale have a bit of an edgier reputation thanks to whatever the hell the good folks over at the CW are doing. Things get dark out there. Hell, there have even been little horror adaptations of the Archie comics, from mythical monsters to the literal predator. But did anyone expect Archie Andrews to be held at gunpoint by the Punisher? The all-American lad with a heart of gold? What did he do to deserve this? Well, as it turns out, he matched the profile of a notorious narcotics smuggler and salesperson known as Red. So the Punisher wasn't off his rocker in pointing a weapon at Archie. But still, all dressed up in his Letterman jacket, and then he's looking down the barrel of a deadly weapon. At least Castle didn't pull the trigger. Coming in number 7, apply directly to the forehead. Head on. You know the old commercial, right? Well, the Punisher decided to take that advice and run with it, although I kinda doubt this is available at Walgreens. See, the human skull is a remarkably strong thing. It takes a lot of force to cause damage to one, especially if you're running low on weapons and ammo. Thankfully, if you're extra resourceful, you might be able to find a solution to being low on head-cracking implements. Just use another person's head. Oh wow. The Punisher just straight up double grips this one guy's head and drives it full force into another dude's dome. It's not often someone can tell you that the last thing that went through their mind was someone else's. Coming in number 6, an Empire's State of Mind. Remember that scene where Batman tosses a guy from like the second story and his victim's like, oh, you're not gonna kill me from here, and Batman's like, yeah, that's kind of the point, I want to break your legs, not your neck. Good times. The Punisher is taking no chances. Legs may be broken, but they're not gonna get up. No sir. Somehow, someway, he brought one of his many marks to the tippy top of the Empire State Building. From my experience, the security around there wouldn't let a spandex-clad man with a skull on his chest carry a bound and gagged person to the observation deck, but hey, Frank Castle does what Frank Castle wants. So after hauling this poor guy all the way up, what does he do? Do they share a moment of mutual appreciation for the New York City skyline? Do they feed quarters into one of the many pairs of tourist binoculars up there? Nah, Frank tosses the guy off the side. And in the comic, it all seems well and good, like flipping a coin off the edge, who's gonna know? The Mythbusters aren't here to confirm whether or not something falling from that height would kill someone, but we can all assume that the man falling from height perished. However, what happened to his body? Did it smash someone's car, land in a dumpster, splatter all across a busy street? It's questions like that that keep me up at night. Coming in number 5, teaming up with Eminem. Did you know that there was a run of comics where the Punisher kills Eminem's team, listens as Eminem raps entire songs to him, and then gets Eminem to kill Barracuda? I'm not sure if this counts as super dark, but that is a very weird crossover. You know what? It is dark. I'm making it so. All those poor groupies gone in the blink of an eye. Then the Punisher has to deal with whatever nonsense Eminem gets him involved with from then on. That's it for this entry. I wanted to bring up the fact that the Punisher and Eminem had a comic series together. Thanks for listening. Coming in number 4, shark bait hoo-ha-ha. We've already touched upon the Punisher's almost religious use of improvised weapons. Pizza, skulls, car batteries, you name it. If it can hypothetically hurt someone, he's probably used it to inflict some serious damage, Phil Swift style. However, a lot of these weapons have probably been used by your average thug to similar effect. Maybe a little less brutal, but still deadly and painful if used correctly. But how many people can say that they've literally used a shark to kill someone. I'm sure there are a few, but the list can't be all that long. So of course, Frank Castle finds a way to utilize a deadly aquatic predator to take down a target. Legend. Noticing that one of the people he was fighting was missing a limb or two near the water, the Punisher got a gruesome idea. After attracting an enormous shark with some blood in the water, he pushes the poor guy in, and we get to see the moment it all comes together. In a flurry of teeth and fins, the criminal is mangled by a shark, and the Punisher simply looks on, satisfied. Coming in number 3, brutalizing Barracuda. Never a fan of underdoing a job, we've seen the Punisher really go to town on all sorts of rivals over the years. It's almost a challenge for authors behind the comics to come up with new and inventive ways to end lives through Castle's eyes. But when he finally gets his hands on longtime enemy Barracuda, the Punisher did not shy away. No sir, he turned that mess up to 10. After biting chunks of his face skin out, Castle goes in for the kill. Not immediately though, he really takes a moment to soak it all in. There are some gunshots and a nice little curb stomp, and then eventually a car battery is brought out. Uh-oh. Allegedly clamped down upon some unmentionables, the Punisher lets loose some insane electrical shocks that really get Barracuda going, and that's not enough even then. After some 15 minutes of agonizing electricity, he finally takes a pickaxe out and chops Barracuda's limbs and head off. That's just horrifying. At number 2, we've got Polar Bear Bloodbath. Now, most of what happens here isn't explicitly shown to the reader. We see Ma Nucci, famed mafia matriarch, appear to get back at the Punisher for killing her sons. However, doing so at the zoo was probably a bad call. The Punisher manages to maneuver the fight into a polar bear enclosure, and these beasts are not happy to have visitors. Dang, and all those Coca-Cola commercials convinced me that polar bears are super chill. What do you mean a major corporation lied to me? Back to the matter at hand though, Ma and a couple of her lackeys are left to fight for their lives against enormous ice-faring predators, and they don't come out the other end looking too pretty. Ma in particular is in pretty bad shape, missing her arms and legs. What she isn't missing, however, is her attitude. And finally at number 1, Into the Fire. And this is a fun one to end on. After putting Ma Nucci through that animalistic encounter, the Punisher had to make sure he finished the job. Just going in and killing her wouldn't be enough though. In fact, to him, that would almost be a mercy. No, he's gotta raise the stakes, as always. So after the entire ordeal is as good as done, he decides to set fire to Ma's mansion with her still in it. She's a feisty one though, and makes it out of the fire one last time. Crawling towards Castle in one final desperate attempt to kill him, she performs what I can only describe as that move that Pokemon do when they run out of PP to use. Struggle. The Punisher sees this, lines up a nasty kick, and sends Ma flying back into the Inferno for good. Sheesh. What a lunatic, am I right? Who else could get away with all this horrific stuff and still be so beloved? Only Frank Castle.
Number 10, Nick Fury Jr. Not only have the pair gone for some dim sum, but Frank seems to respect Nick's recommendation on the soup. Put their agreements on food aside though for a moment, and you have Nick Fury Jr. really doing Frank a solid. Not only did he give him the War Machine armor to take out a dictator in Europe, but he also agreed to help Frank stay out of jail. If anyone knows anything about the Punisher, it's his respect for someone who can keep their word. Number 9, War Machine. Like I said before, he respects only a select few superheroes, most of them tend to be soldiers. Before the Punisher took over the War Machine, he really respected James Rhodes, who previously donned the armor. In Civil War II, Rhodes had died, but Tony Stark was able to bring him back to life in Invincible Iron Man number 600. However, even when James returned, he didn't want the armor, but he did want Frank to surrender it because it represented heroism. In the rarest of occasions, Frank actually obliged and gave up the War Machine armor. He knew that James Rhodes was a good man and showed him the utmost respect. Number 8, ELEKTRA. Now it's highly debated on whether or not ELEKTRA is a hero or a villain, but considering how much the Punisher hates people, seeing him sharing a milkshake with anyone has to be mentioned in this list. The two ended up falling in love when Frank witnessed ELEKTRA taking out one of her targets. He even became a better fighter overall just by training with her. Even at the point where he believed he was being targeted by ELEKTRA and her team, he refused to attack her physically. Number 7, Thor. Even though Thor shows full support for the Avengers, a team that really doesn't care for Frank, Thor and Frank still have an understanding, especially with Thor saying, "I know your madness." The Punisher, I believe, respects Thor because he knows that he operates with a code, even if it's not one that others can agree on. Number 6, Black Widow.
Unfortunately, I can't allow that. You'll have to adjust to having a new partner.
I hope you can keep up.
Comic books aside, in the Marvel animated release titled Avengers Confidential, the main characters were Black Widow and the Punisher. At first, Frank wasn't privy to the idea of working with S.H.I.E.L.D., but if it meant his freedom, he would lend a hand to Natasha in hopes of preventing criminals from selling S.H.I.E.L.D. technology. At the very end of that mission, Black Widow actually helps Frank escape when S.H.I.E.L.D. goes back on their word. Gotta respect that. The two even shared a kiss to seal the deal. Number 5. Spider-Man. At first their friendship had a rocky start, being that the Punisher's main appearance in The Amazing Spider-Man was villain status. However, what we learned was that the true villain of the story, the Jackal, had convinced Frank that Spider-Man was the villain. So a big miscommunication led to the Punisher kicking the life out of Spidey. Soon enough though, when the Punisher finally realizes that Parker isn't such a bad guy, the two end up working together. And years later, he even saves Spider-Man during the Civil War storyline. In at number 4, Painkiller Jane. The Punisher certainly met the female version of himself in the crossover event with Painkiller Jane. Jane is an undercover cop that survived a bombing and ended up with regeneration powers as a result. Her mission is to take out the Mafia, but when she meets the Punisher, she falls right in love. Even when Frank threatened her, she asked, "Do you kill people for falling in love with you?" Number 3. Bucky Barnes. For years, Bucky was a Black Ops agent for the enemy while under their control, but he and the Punisher definitely share the same mode of operation. During the Punisher War Machine storyline, when Frank was using the armor, he learned that Baron Zemo was going to break out the new fascist Steve Rogers. And to prevent this, Nick Fury Jr. sent Black Widow and the Winter Soldier to help out Frank Castle. The three of them all shared a common goal: keeping this evil Captain America locked up. When the Punisher was arrested after the fight, Bucky was there to help break Frank out. Number 2. Daredevil. The two have been battling it out for over 30 years, and if Frank didn't look like a villain next to Spider-Man, he certainly does against Daredevil. Punisher doesn't just respect Daredevil though, but he's even said something along the lines of Matt being the only smart one. Frank Castle knows he can trust Daredevil, and even though Matt thinks that Frank is a bit psychotic, he knows that when the chips are down, they can count on each other.
And Frank Castle is actually a good man. He doesn't know the difference between right and wrong anymore, and he doesn't need punishment for that. He needs help.
Lastly, in our number 1 spot, Captain America. When Steve died temporarily, of course, Frank altered his costume to pay tribute to America's fallen hero. Although this respect only goes one way, the Punisher shows the most respect for Captain America. During the Civil War storyline, the Punisher saves Spider-Man, and when bringing him to Steve's secret hideout, he asked to join them. However, Captain America couldn't forgive Frank because he killed 2 villains who were also wanting to join. This was unthinkable in his eyes and dealt out a serious beating before kicking him out. The entire time, the Punisher would not lay a finger on him and said he refused to out of respect for the man in red, white, and blue.
Number 10. Hawkeye, Clint Barton edition. There is more than one Hawkeye. Let's start off with a cute, let's call it cute moment between these two during the War Machine Punisher arc. We'll get into how he got that armor a little later. In Punisher Volume 1, number 224, we have Clint taking a shot at Castle mid-flight, which he of course makes. But well, Frank's not exactly happy about it, and he takes Clint's pizza as retaliation. Yes, you heard that right. I think that last part just really drives home how petty that whole incident was. Pure minor annoyance to start us off before we get serious, cause oh, it's gonna get serious. Number 9. Deadpool. The merc with a mouth could make his way onto many of these annoyance lists, and I'm sure he already has. As funny as he can be for audiences, working with him can be a bit of a chore for the heroes of the Marvel Universe, but particularly for Frank Castle. While both these characters can be considered anti-heroes, they operate on a very different set of morals, and the tones of their books are quite different, though more so as it has evolved. Early Deadpool does not bear too much resemblance to modern Deadpool. The foundations are there, but he has evolved over the years. These two have clashed on numerous occasions, usually in more comedic battles. Well, on Deadpool's end anyways. However, they really began to rub each other the wrong way when they ended up on the same team, this being in the 2013 series run of Thunderbolts. The two were added to a team assembled by General Ross, aka the Red Hulk, or Rulk. They were assigned to take on, well, assignments similar to those of X-Force, which was a change for this team. Here, Deadpool nursed some serious feelings for ELEKTRA, and he became jealous of the connection she shared with Frank, which led to much whining and attempts at escalation on his part. Basically, the Punisher just wants Deadpool to leave him alone, but circumstances and mercenary contracts keep bringing the two back together. Number 8. Batman. You heard that right. Now before you get irate and proceed to be scandalized that the host apparently can't tell the difference between Marvel and DC, let me tell you about the 90s, a time when Marvel and DC actually crossed over a few times, even creating an amalgam universe that was comprised of their characters combined, fused together into one. It was preceded by a bunch of team-ups. I have a soft spot for the Jubilee and Robin team-up, that being the third Robin Tim Drake. You know it got romantic. Side note, there were a couple of team-ups in the early 2000s as well. JLA/Avengers anyone? Anyway, for this annoyance we're going back to 1994, and a comic called Punisher/Batman Deadly Nights. We're looking at this one and not the other team up because this one has Frank going up against Bruce Wayne, not Jean-Paul Valley, aka Azrael, who was Batman for a hot minute post Bane breaking Bruce's back. In this comic, the two team up to stop an alliance between Jigsaw and the Joker. However, Frank just couldn't get behind the Dark Knight's methods, and actually wound up finding himself disgusted by what he viewed as a codependent relationship between the Joker and Batman. Depending upon who you talk to, he's not wrong. Number 7. Archie Andrews. Oh, reaching again are we? No, Archie is a superhero actually. Sometimes. Let me explain. In the 90s, yes, the glorious 90s, there was an Archie comic called Archie and the Super Teens, and Archie was Pure Heart the Powerful, a hero who taps into his pH factor, his pure heart, which gives him super strength and resilience, but he can only use these powers so long as his heart is pure. So no dark feelings for him. These comics debuted in 1994, which was also the year that the Archie meets the Punisher comic debuted. So all I'm saying is that this could be the same universe. Headcanon powers activate. In this comic, Frank mistakes Archie for his target, but then the two need to team up to save a kidnapped Veronica Lodge. As you can imagine, teaming up with an awkward teen who isn't exactly the most helpful, pure heart or no, this was a bit of a harder assignment than most. Also, he flirts with Miss Grundy. Actual Miss Grundy, not criminally negligent, predatory hot Miss Grundy from Riverdale. Number 6. Captain America. This shouldn't really surprise anyone. When written correctly, these two are operating on pretty much the opposite sides of the moral spectrum. Cap does not approve of the Punisher's methods, and when given the opportunity is not shy about expressing it. Multiple times, such as during the original Civil War comics run back in 2006. This was particularly hurtful to Frank because he actually admired Captain America, and in a way still does. Although he actually liked Hydra Cap, so I think that tells you all you need to know about that. The two have also had their alternate universe run-ins. Frank has killed Cap twice. One is a zombie Cap begging to be killed because of his actions though. The other time though is from the Punisher Kills the Marvel Universe one-shot released in 1995, wherein Frank is pushed to the edge by the killing of his family during a battle between Avengers, X-Men, and the Brood. He takes his anger out on the heroes he views as responsible for making it happen. One of those, of course, being Captain America. In this arc, Punisher feels that the heroes are derelict. It actually all leads to a rather heart-wrenching conclusion. It may sound like a gimmick, but this comic is worth a read. Also, these two have a team-up comic called Blood and Glory. Just thought you'd like to know, because that's a great title. Number 5. Venom. Now this may surprise some, because really as far as anti-heroes go, at times Venom can be pretty brutal. And in Venom's early days as a solo frontrunner, the two did team up, such as in Funeral Pyre back in 1993. I'm telling you, people make fun of 90s comics a lot, but some cool stuff happened. However, there's a bit more tension between them these days, particularly since Frank killed Anti-Venom at one point. Yep, Frank can be too intense even for Eddie Brock, who was struggling to keep Frank in check. The Punisher doesn't like people questioning his methods, especially when they turn out to be wrong. But don't worry, he got better. It's the comic verse, death is an inconvenience. You're just one wall punch away from being revived. Well, in the DC universe anyway. It may get even more convoluted in the Marvel universe, but hey, Tony Stark can just build you a new body. It'll be fine. Number 4. Iron Man. This was a more recent development post-Civil War II, the comic book event from 2016, which fans have a lot of feelings about. A lot of which can be summed up with a simple, but why though? Punisher found himself in possession of Rhodey's War Machine armor post his death, and was using it in ways that Tony didn't exactly approve of, and he wanted it back. Frank Castle was not on his side in this conflict, and wasn't thrilled with being told what to do by Tony Stark. In fact, it wasn't even him who got the armor back, but actually a newly resurrected James Rhodes, in a new body. Like I said, Tony Stark will build you a new body. He also had to get himself a new body post Civil War II as well. Number 3. Black Widow. Now this is yet another near philosophical conflict between these two, but they can also work well together, so let's take a look at an example with 2014's Madhouse film Avengers Confidential, Black Widow and Punisher. The thing with the Punisher is he wants things done on his timeline, and organizations like S.H.I.E.L.D., sometimes they're running a longer game, letting people get away for bigger fish, etc. Frank's not about that life. However, Black Widow is actually quite good at following orders, and despite everything she can be quite loyal, which means sometimes her unwillingness to deviate from her mission can put her directly in Frank's way, which, let's face it, is annoying, particularly when she is ready to fight to back it up. But they can also work well together if their goals align. Number 2. Spider-Man. Now the Punisher and Spider-Man have a pretty even-keel relationship in modern comics, as much as anyone can have with Frank, that is. But they did not have a good first meeting. The Punisher actually debuted in a Spider-Man comic, specifically The Amazing Spider-Man number 129 in 1974. Hired by the Jackal, the Punisher was out to kill Spidey, but actually turned into a very popular character, as despite everything, he was revealed to have a moral code, and people were curious about him and wanted to know more. Ultimately, Frank was initially used as a contrast to more liberal Marvel characters, of whom Spidey was one, but post their first meeting the two would team up frequently, where their contrasting viewpoints and styles would come into conflict. Side note, he's killed Spidey a bunch of times in events and alternate timelines. Poor Peter. However, he hasn't come into conflict with him anywhere near as much as our number 1. There's a fine line between grudging respect and outright annoyance, and number 1 is straddling that perfectly. I'm pretty sure you can guess who it is. It's the Daredevil. In some ways, Matt Murdock is Frank Castle's perfect foil. Their mere existence and methods challenge the other, and they have completely given their lives over to their ideals. And yet, they can both kind of see where the other is coming from. Lots of the Punisher's annoyance stems from the fact that he feels that the Daredevil would be more effective if he was more ruthless, and the fact that he believes that he has faith in an inherently flawed system. But more than that, Matt makes him question himself by showing another path that is not wholly unsuccessful, one of mercy. Depending on the conflict, the Daredevil can end up making Frank look like a monster. This was very poignantly displayed in the aforementioned Punisher Kills the Marvel Universe, when, spoilers for a comic from 1995, Punisher kills the Daredevil, unmasking him to reveal his friend and ally Matt Murdock. It's the final straw for him, and ultimately, he kills himself. That's right, ending it off full dark, only darkness.